Thank you for joining us again for our Guftgu session this Friday. We have Uzma Mohsin joining us from Delhi. So we're in the same city, but we're on two different screens because we're not able to meet. And some of you I know already are aware of Uzma's work, but some I know are not. So just to give you a little bit of an introduction to Uzma's practice, Uzma really uses a lot of her personal voice and almost a metaphorical exploration of her work through image making, although photography is not the only aspect of her practice. She's exhibited at the Girl Gaze exhibition, which was supported by Black Country in the UK, and also shown at the Blast Festival as well. I think there was an exhibition over there. One of her work, which we will also, I mean, we'll be discussing hopefully all her works if we get time to. But also Ellipsis was a group show that was done by, curated by Rahab Alana at the, Jawahar Kala Kendra in Jaipur, and Uzma's work was a part of that as well. What's interesting, and I think what I was quite curious to talk to you about also, is that in Uzma's work, there's a constant experimentation or exploration of the different mediums within photography as well. Of course, we are, one of our more focused conversations will be on the book format, but her experiments within analog processes, her experiments with installations and exhibitions also of her own work, and within analog photography as well, has often been very well thought out in terms of how she chooses her emotional or political stand as far as the work is also considered. And I thought it might be a good excuse for us to get to know more about not just Uzma's book making, although it could be journal or book. I'll let you guys decide as we go further into the conversation. Maybe let's start from the act of journaling itself, Uzma. Right?
Since you were so very kindly telling everybody about my work, but in a very simple way, I think one of the things which, when I am kind of working, the things which kind of somewhere, they kind of form an important part of my process of working is the process of making the work. Is the process of making images. Okay.
Right.
And if you look at my work, actually, that there is some kind of a conversation around the process of making that image. It's not just simply that you just go and shoot. And one of the things is obviously the process of image making, and the other thing which is kind of always catches my attention when I am kind of working and doing work is conversations. So I think photography, in kind of, that's how we are coming to journaling, is that I feel that photography is not just really like having conversations about others or about the world, or it's also a conversation with your own self. Right. And the whole practice of journaling for me has come from these two things, that somehow for myself, as the work separate, but just for myself, I like to take these notes, or I like to kind of try and put these little impressions, or kind of it's like a note making or doing studies for the work which you are going to make. And actually, you'll be surprised, like this Anna Atkins book, on the it's actually a collection of studies which finally became a 3-volume work, on photographs of the British algae. It's called Photographs of the British Algae Cyanotype Impressions. So it's this whole idea of impressions, of reflection, of kind of note making, which I think any kind of, it's important in when you're researching, when you're also trying to articulate your own thought process. So I think that's where this thing of journaling is kind of, I think, kind of falls in that
Right.
kind of, you know,
Yeah. No,
just
I
a
think it's interesting also because I mean, very
raw.
often, even when we discuss an artist's work, you know, whether it's in retrospect or, you know, an artist who's currently working on a project, very often we get occupied with what is the final work, you know, we get occupied with that that final image that comes out, and very little actually gets spoken about the process of arriving at that image. And what's interesting is that for you the process is probably, I mean, I don't know about weighing it out, but maybe holds more importance, you know, to a certain degree, because it's like, you know, when we talk about the act of exploration, right, the journey has to end at a particular point, right? We're all aware of the fact that there is going to be one particular journey, but our investment in how we arrive at that point is, I think, where we also begin to understand who we are. Like you said, you know, the conversation is also within
Yeah, I
as
think,
much as it has to be outside.
yeah, I think that is very, very kind of important. And I think, as I mean, for most artists, I think that is a very exciting part, you know, that is the exciting part where you come, you know, that your journey with your own work is very, it's the most important and the most exciting part of the work, you know.
Right.
So, I mean, there are always all these stories around how pictures are taken, or you know how, like, even when
Yeah.
you're going out to shoot, the stories, the backstories are always like so much more, you know, they have so much more value.
Right.
And also the thing is that I think right now the way things are, like, you know, this whole, the way photography has changed now, you know,
Right.
this you have to be aware and you have to be conscious of this thing of the process, because I think you know, I mean, technology has worked wonders, and finally, like, you know, you can take even great photographs through yeah, like on Instagram. If you open Instagram, you'll find beautiful pictures. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
so what is it that's making photographic work, uh, you know, what is it that makes your photographic work of any consequence, you
Right.
know?
Right.
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 So it must be some kind of a thought process, some idea, something you must be, you know,
Hmm.
and this is something which one has to be really, like, you have to start being conscious of these kind of things.
Right.
I mean,
I
for
think one thing that really stuck to me, you know, in our chat yesterday, you know, while we were talking, is when you said that uh, in many ways we all journal as practitioners of,
yes,
you know, different mediums. Even we all have a different process of journaling, but what makes the difference, and I think what's important to you, is that that journaling also be uh, made into this tangible idea that one can begin to understand. So it's not just, you know, the one photograph that you see up against a wall, but it's also to read up on how you arrived at that photograph, and that probably becoming, you know, in many ways the conversation starter for issues or even perspectives that you would like to put forward with your works. You know, and I think at this point I do want to kind of uh, open out into how this journaling process has evolved for you over the years. You know, where it found its maybe influence from, to a certain degree, like where you started that as a practice and it became, I guess, kind of like a ritual almost, you know, for you over your different projects.
so like yesterday I was mentioning, like, you know, like, yeah, as practitioners, people, I mean, it's like notes, you're making notes, you know. I mean, if you ask a scholar, they keep making notes. If you ask a researcher, he's sitting in the library and making some kind of a, you know, you are kind of putting, you are constantly in this process. And like, even artists, they maintain archives, you know, of their work.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Right.
right. So the only thing is for me, I guess, that thing of, one is that it's lying in your computer or lying as negatives is one part of, I mean, definitely people are
Right.
doing that. I mean, they already are doing some kind of this constant
Hmm.
you know, kind of thinking and kind of clocking it and keeping a log. For me, I think the thing became more like putting it to some kind of a book format, because it, as I was mentioning that, in NID, we had this thing of maintaining sketchbooks. And I think
Right.
when I look at it, I think, and I mean, books are something so easy. You can always find a book. You can always paste things on the book. And it's something so, you can easily handle it. You don't have, it's such a lovely thing to have. It has a good physical feel.
Yeah.
I mean, everything works for a book, I think.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the simplest thing. And, it's so easy. You can always carry it with you and whatever.
Right.
And I think
Right.
my journey obviously begins with this thing of maintaining these sketchbooks. So, my initial, if you see my initial journals, they were a lot like they also are illustrated journals. They've got drawing in them. And I kind of continued a lot initially with drawing journals, and it became like drawing and camera, like photographic image journals. It's got all kinds of things because you're exploring. It's your private space where you can kind of do whatever you want. So it's kind of a fun thing to do. And I mean, and then it became photographic journals. Then they needn't be photographic journals also. They can even be a stack of papers, which I will keep considering it to be a very important kind of journal. Like, in some works, it's become like that. So there are different kinds. Like, you go into, sometimes you really want to physically produce it. Sometimes they just lie as files on my computer, like as InDesign files. Some of them I even like I've done the layout, I've put it, but I've not bothered to take a printout of it. So the form, I think, kind of changes. And that also is nice, because then you're also playing with different forms, and it's a free space. It's a fluid, it's your space. So you have the right to do whatever with it.
Right. Again, going back to something you just actually mentioned is that, artists or practitioners always have these archives, right? And for you, the archive finds its space through the journal, right? Like, in many ways, you're archiving your archive in the journals, if I'm kind of going on the right
part of it. Like, the archive would be larger. Like, it would not always, like, all my pictures are not going to be in the journals. You're actually curating parts of it to follow a thought process. Basically, journaling is also it's also going according to your headspace, also like, it's kind of, you might be working on certain ideas which you want to put together. So you might do drafts of it as physical copies or something like that. Or you might just be talking about really like just doing simple diaristic work, which you might, be just recording everyday mundane things. I don't know. So it doesn't, it's kind of it's not really your archive, but it definitely comes from, it's like it's merged, it kind of, they're merged. I mean, it's not really, it's not your fully your archive.
Right. And so that's actually what I wanted to kind of get to, was that from the archive going into the journal is obviously a process of conscious or subconscious curation to a certain degree. It's a process of editing even. And very often, and I mean, we'll talk about this down the line, but you also work on projects that go on for extended periods of time. So very long form in terms of research and engagement as well. And as a result of that, maybe oftentimes, there might be portions of the archive that don't go into the journal, which in retrospect, you might feel like, I feel differently about it as well. So is there also kind of like a re-editing or re-going back to these?
Yeah, I think that engagement with your own work practice has to be there. And sometimes you take out something, but it's just might be a draft. It might mature later. That body of work might, you might be further working, and you might draw, finally come to some kind of a thing.
Right.
So I think, that is definitely there. Like, sometimes when I'm making the journals, I mean, I've just made them, and they might not be like a standalone. They might not be like of some consequence. But sometimes, like the way the ones when which we exhibited in Cardiff, it is a set of 3 journals which comes together to form an kind of idea. But I think the practice of journaling, yes, it has to have that, some, for me at least, I mean, it has that sense of kind of some kind of continuity, and it definitely has to have that discipline of continuing the process of kind of logging, you know.
Right.
So that is there, but it's not necessary that every piece you do is like
Yeah.
going to be like a standalone. But the nicest thing about the format of journals, and like when I say journal, I mean, I obviously try and like mostly a large number of them, for me at least, have been these, is the book form.
Right.
Is, so I find that to be actually it's like a long form, like what you were saying, where you kind of curate and you reflect on the material. So the form itself is something which is slightly where you have to engage with the material, and you know, and your headspace to put it together, right? And I mean, I am a person who I I am a person who enjoys long format actually. So I was mentioning that I worked in Tehelka, you know, I worked in very serious journalistic, investigative journalistic kind of deadlines for many years, and I mean, that's a very different kind of thing. It's not that I have not been there, but it's not something up my. I like to take time to think about the things, you know, which I'm about, whatever I'm making or whatever I'm thinking about. It's something I mean, that's just a personal kind of, I think.
No, that's true. I mean, it's something that we were talking about also, about how even the format of how you could explore a story in journalism has changed so much today. You know, there was a time when maybe it could offer a space of real study and research and reflection, but I guess everything has to be very instant now. So, you know, so it
Yes,
changes
I mean,
that entire process as
yeah,
well.
but I mean, if you look at it, like I was mentioning, that a lot of the young work, I mean, young photographers who are doing some really like nice work, I mean, but they are all doing it in personal kind of capacities, you know.
Yeah.
So, and they are spending time to do that work, you know.
Right.
They are doing it on their own, and they're struggling to do it on their own, but it is definitely not in this very like, come on, let's take it out every day kind of a thing. I mean, that's one way of doing it. I mean, Instagram is equally exciting. I'm not saying that it's
Right.
not the way, but they're different things. They are different things. So there has to be in work, when as an artist community, I mean, there has to be diverse voices. So if some people are interested in doing very single image, very fast thing work, there should be also space for doing very slow work. I mean, you know, I mean, that what will kind of give it that kind of, you know, for a medium to grow, it has to have these kind of different synergies, you know. Otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah, no, I see. I mean, it makes a lot of sense because also, um, in many ways, how you create work is a reflection of who you are, right? Of your own personality, of your own motivations. And I think it might work even the other way around, where some people find that rush and that joy in doing, in like the immediate response to, you know, creating images. And I don't know how they might react if they were put on the other spectrum and say, take 6 months, think about it, and they'd be like, we don't know what to do.
For this, I'll say one thing. You know, I mean, I can call myself a slow person, or I can just. There's a lovely quote by Sartre which has always stayed with me, which is that if you feel lonely when you're alone, you are in bad company, and that really kind of is inspiring for me to spend time, kind of thinking about things I do and enjoy my own company for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe we can start with some visuals on time that you spent with yourself while you were making some.
Yeah, I can show you maybe some of the stuff now. Okay. Just give me a second.
No worries, no worries.
So I can maybe show you some of the very kind of those sketching journals which I was kind of talking about. So these are the kind of different forms which you will see. But these are the kind of, drawings, or, they are very drawing based stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, it could be stuck stuff, or it could be whatever kind of, it could have all kinds of. But these are the kind of, stuff which I would be doing. And I still at times do it, actually. I quite like. So what I'll do is I'll show you one, which we can just run and everybody can get a sense of what it is like.
Yes, that would be.
So this one is from 2011, actually. So, but it is just notings of things which I have seen or I'm thinking about, or when I was spending time in the.
And are they from a particular
Yes,
place, or
it's
are
from
they
a particular, it's from a particular time. So this is a journal where I was spending time in Switzerland. So it's from there. So besides the fact that I was doing, so this image which you see is all the work which I produced there, but my journal is totally like it's like a illustrated journal,
Right.
I was also shooting very, a lot
Mm-hmm.
in the thing. So sometimes it's kind of funny that you're also trying to maintain too many things. You're also illustrating and writing stuff down, and then you're producing work, and then you might also be taking pictures as part of some just
Your own experience.
talking. Yeah, you're just spending time, and so it can go a little crazy, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like you've got your hands in multiple pies
Yes.
at the same time.
Sometimes it can.
Right.
These are the kind of personal journals which I kind of just show you a few kind of examples. But yeah, they're largely diaries. They're records of some kind of. They could be like totally records of or logs for totally something like mundane life, everyday life kind of thing, or they could be like like
Right.
what's going on in my head.
And
So,
this is when photography started coming into the journals.
yes, they're already they're all. So these are the kind of everyday type of things. So this is something I have read, so it's based on that. Like it's actually like a little poem by William Blake. It's about roles. So it's the title of the journal is called Never Crave a Rose. So that's what it is.
It's very interesting, actually, you said this, because I read this poem when I was in school, in my 11th or 12th, and I was really kind of overwhelmed by it, I think, and I actually spent a whole like a fair amount of time, and I wrote a poem in
So
response
actually, I
to
should
that
leave the
poem.
poem there now. While we talk, they can understand what we are saying.
Right. And I mean, I remember that I in a response, I had written a poem to the poem, almost like a conversation, or,
Yeah, I mean,
thinking.
exactly. Like you are doing that. I mean, you are actually kind of reacting to things. So it's nice to just somehow remember what you are thinking of.
Right, right, right.
That's what it is. So yeah, that's that. That's that.
Right.
And this is about space. It's about, I spend a lot of time next to the ocean. I love the ocean. So it's on that.
You're also a diver, right?
Yes. So that's from my
There we
own attempts at diving.
are. Right.
But this is about the people, like, my friends. And so this is like a full journal. I actually have it here. Maybe I can later show
Yeah,
you.
that would be nice. Maybe
Yeah.
once you've seen this.
Yeah. So that's from there. Yeah. But we can,
I
yeah,
have
maybe we
one
can.
question just before we move into
Yeah.
your, more long format works, and
Yeah.
but like, so the journals that we saw have a sense of informality to them. They also have kind of, maybe in some ways, this idea of losing track of time, even, usually when we're working with a specific uh, project, there is, whether it's linear or non-linear, there is a sense of some format of time that begins to exist on it, maybe because of the subject that we choose, or many other factors even sometimes. When you're kind of making I think the journal of the book was called 40, right?
Yes.
The last one that we
Yes.
saw. So at what point do you kind of decide that?
So actually for this journal, it was very simple because I actually only made a copy for
Yes.
myself and for the friend who turned 40. That is why it is called 40.
Okay.
But
Okay.
it's actually looking at, it's looking at life spent as a young person in the city. I mean, I've been recording that, and a lot of us are also recording what's
Right.
near us. And this question of this thing that where you decide, that
Right.
whether the journal is worth the making into this thing is,
It
I mean,
is.
it's a question which one has to ask one's own self, It's a fluid thing. It's not, yes, there is a periodicity about journaling, like you do continue with it, you make a sustained this thing, but some kind of, I mean, at what point do you think that it is to make it public, or what is there that that when you put forward is worth the, to be put on,
Right.
it has to have some idea, it has to have some kind of a subject matter or something strong which you want to say to everybody else, So, I mean, definitely and when you do it, these things emerge. It's not that, these things automatically, they emerge out of the practice. If you start, I mean, if pictures speak to you, right? So after sometimes certain things, certain patterns, you will be able to see them as a photographer, as a practitioner, that, or sometimes you're chasing certain thoughts, and, over a certain period of time of thinking about those things kind of form, so it's at that point that you will kind of know that, oh, I want to make this, or I want to put it in this format or whatever. And sometimes you make it in simple things, and like I was with, like, when the journals which we will see, the one which I keep saying, which are a set of 3, like they only make sense to me as a set of 3. Though they're single ones also, they are fully complete, right? But it's just that I see them, they came together to me as a set of 3. So sometimes it's also like, sometimes, these patterns emerge and you can work around them.
Right.
Kind of, like that.
And in fact, let's move from the informal, into a more, when you started actually using the journal format, but kind of working into the book form with particular projects, like in the Company of Girls is maybe one of
it's actually, I'll just share the screen again. But yes. So actually, this is one of my earliest kind of journals, which, I was, this is kind of at the end, in my college, I had this great love for chasing circuses, and I was doing, when this is in late, in the 90s. And I did a lot of documentation of circuses, especially looking at circuses backstage. I mean, that was one of my first big, like, kind of work, I would say, of documentation, and spending a lot of time and shooting a lot. And while, like, I was doing this, and so this is the first journal from there. And so while I was shooting backstage, I kind of spent a lot of time with the girls who were performers there. And so when I was shooting there, I would always, this is obviously before the cell phones came in, and I ended up chatting a lot, spending time with these girls. And I realized that they wanted to be photographed. Like, I was shooting them in a certain way, but they would take me. Like, they would say, Didi, come here, please take my picture. And I would say, okay. And then they would stand, and they would stand in a certain manner. Like, they all were very, like, they had these very kind of poses which they wanted to be photographed in. And I got fascinated by that, because I was like, I mean, I do understand that they have definitely they have I mean, it's a very tragic story. It was a very tragic story for those girls being in the circus. I mean, I'm not denying that, but it was amazing to kind of look at their own self-image. You know, it was the journal finally, so this came from this idea of what is their own self-image. So I actually ended up spending time and giving them, like, you know, these drawings. Like, we ended up, because I used to draw so much, also carried, like, they must have, I don't even remember if, I don't know how, maybe I was carrying a journal or something, I don't remember, but I remember that we ended up chatting, and I ended up giving them these one sketchbook, and, you know, I gave them some pens to kind of work, like, you know, draw. And when I visited them the next time, they had drawn themselves out, and it just kind of fell together. So I will show you these, but these are the kind of, you know, drawings they made of themselves, and these are the pictures which I took of them when they wanted to be photographed, and you can kind of clearly see, like, how they imagine themselves.
Of themselves.
Yes, of themselves. And it's kind of fascinating, because at that point of time, I think the only thing, they were kind of very much into Bollywood heroines and stuff. And I remember they were copying from a very torn magazine, which they kind of, you know, try and trace and draw or something.
Okay. Right.
Like, obviously, and they would talk a lot about being, but you know, these are the kind of.
And they also gave themselves names, right?
Yes. So they all had these kind of names they gave themselves as performers. So she's Kareem. Kiran. Sorry.
Yeah.
This
And
is
so did you ever, I mean, by any chance, were you having this conversation with them about why they picked on these names, or how these names, you know, because of course, in one way, the way that they do posture themselves has, you know, the idea of maybe a sense of
I think
aspiration.
the thing of not being, is not so much to do with the name, comes from the fact that also their backstories are very sad, and they don't want to be somehow identified by being in this. So I think it's not like just it's not just that they are
Playfulness.
Also, yeah, it's not so these are, I mean, this work I haven't actually published, because it has all these you know, kind of yeah, I mean, it needs it's not a simple work. So, and I keep thinking that I should write out all these things out and then take it out. I don't want it to be just like a set of drawings or a set of images, you know.
Right.
It is about self-image and how, you know, the story lies there. It's not really so much.
Right. And the title also comes from the fact that
yes, they were called company girls earlier, because there's a story of this one particular you know, earlier when I think initially Indian circuses started, so there was the women were not really like kind of taken care of. And there was one particular guy, I think, I don't remember now from where it was, it from you know, that there's a town, Thalse or something in South India, where the main circus, you know, Indian circus kind of started the first school there. And it's
is this in Kerala?
This particular character, it's in Kerala.
Thalassery.
Thalassery.
Okay.
So this guy he's not from Thalassery, he's from somewhere nearby, but he was the first guy who kind of took care of this particular set of artists, I mean performers, and he took them in his wing. His name was, I think, some Baba Venkit Rao Deval or something like that. And he basically took care of these girls, and he started keeping them in the circus while the circus would travel. And so they became known as company girls, actually. So that's what the story is. They started being called because they were associated with that circus company. So they were called company. The story is that, actually.
Right.
So, yeah, so these are the kind of, yeah. So
Which brings us to our, so I mean, I know that for the company of girls, you were back at home in Aligarh after NID, and you know, kind of maybe in some ways working on something on your own after a design education as well. Um, Although you did mention that you've kind of from the very beginning been interested in exploring, you were never someone who could really kind of get yourself to sit in one spot for too long. um, and that actually brings me to, because a lot of the works and the books that you have created have come from the idea of travel itself, you know, and what that travel does to you as an individual, what kind of reflections it brings upon you, you know, is maybe how like not the trilogy, but the three books maybe come together, you know, and then there are other thematics that come into place. Do you want to talk about how travel began to influence how you were looking at the book form even?
yeah, I think, I mean, not just the book form, travel, I think is a very, it's just a refreshing thing for people, a change, you know, and it's a
Right.
real, it's also, I think, being on the ground, you know, also, I'm not just saying travel like traveling as a tourist thing. I have also changed cities. I have lived in different cities. I've lived in
Right.
Aligarh, I've lived in Ahmedabad, I've lived in Delhi, uh, you know, so longer periods of my life I'm talking
Hmm.
about. And is also that, you know, when I was in Tehelka, the idea of being on the ground is something which I think we have to be very, very, you know, there's another world out there, you
Right.
know, and I think that somehow I met some very, very good editors, and they would always say that you have to have the pulse of the ground. And for me, that kind of is, this travel gave me some kind of, you know, if you go out and you go to, I've traveled to all kinds of places, you know,
Hmm.
and I don't have this thing of, you know, that I won't go out. Like I've gone to Mewat. Whenever I'm now in Aligarh, I go out. People keep telling me, don't go after 6:30. Please don't go out. You get mugged or whatever. But you know, you just can't. You get a sense of things. It's good to go out. So that thing I think has always been uh, a big plus for my work.
Right.
And so this thing, there is a whole set of journals which I also did, which I will actually be now showing you.
Yeah, that would be great.
They were kind of travelogues, and I spent, you know, kind of documenting some kind of these travelogues or these journeys which I had made. I kind of
Hmm.
did work around that.
Hmm.
So that's what.
Yeah, maybe we can see some
Yeah.
of the safarnamas, as you call them. Mhm.
So yeah, so they are basically safarnamas, and actually, if I look at it, I mean, if you look at history, earliest records of history are actually travel.
Safarnamas, yeah, yeah.
Yes, so that is kind of very interesting. That I mean, it's of interest to me.
Right.
Kind of also document a bit of where I'm going and what I'm looking at.
Maybe over the years, Uzma, they will be like how we read the books of Ibn Battuta, you know, like
Yeah, I
they
mean,
will be
you know,
the
you will be very
Hindustani
much
version.
surprised that, you know, in my Aligarh work, I actually was so surprised to find an account of Ibn Battuta on Aligarh. It is
Oh,
fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating. Yes. So, and he describes Aligarh to be a place where, so it was a fortified city now, which doesn't agree. I mean, it doesn't
right,
remain like that. But the
right,
old town is built slightly on a raised kind of a mound, and he describes it as being surrounded by these old mango orchards. And actually, if you go still, there are mango orchards. And I was wondering, actually, I've taken these images of this mango orchard. I was just like, and then later when I was
right,
researching, that thing went with this. It went so very well with what he is describing. He's
right.
actually said it, like, you know. So it's fascinating. Sometimes, I mean, travelogues, and if you look at history, I mean, history is absolutely fascinating. I think it's something lovely to engage with. one should, for sure.
Yes, and we will get to your
Yeah, so
Aligarh
let me
work
just show
also
you some of
slowly,
these.
but
I mean,
yeah.
these are just like some like basic, sometimes I
Hmm.
carry them. So you can see, like, sometimes the styles and all, everything changes. I mean, it's just like sticking stuff. It could be anything. But this is from Japan.
Yeah,
And
I think you should talk about how the sushi
yeah,
dreams of manga
yeah.
happened.
So I'm into sushi, and I was seeing when I was traveling in Japan, I was looking at all these girls. They're known as the I'm forgetting the name.
Okay.
Uh,
I
Haru, something girls. They dress up as mangas. There's an area in Tokyo where they go. I mean, you can
okay.
find them. And I was roaming around, and these all people were kind of also dressed up. They're so much into manga. People are reading manga. So there was this. I ended up just thinking of this thing of sushi dreams of manga, and I was kind of recording what I am eating and these people I am seeing. So it
Right.
was kind of. It's just a kind of a small thing.
Mhm.
But sometimes it's like also it's a good thing of what you're thinking to try and visually try and do it for yourself. It
Right.
doesn't have to be always for some big it's not a,
Project.
yeah, it's not like a project situation. It's also these things help you hone your own just like
Thought processes.
thought processes.
Yeah.
Yes, and they are fun. The best part is they are fun. You're doing it for yourself. You can just freak out and do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So you can see, like, it has a very kind of a light-hearted, fun feel to it.
Right.
This is again a journal from which I have here actually.
Oh,
Which
nice. Okay.
yeah, it's a bit of a biggish.
Nice and
I can
yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's like this.
You
Sorry,
can hold
this is
on that. No, no, that's
holding it,
perfectly fine.
but yeah. So this is from Vietnam, which was just about people and the spaces. So sometimes I just try and these are, I mean, sometimes they're also fun things to kind of do for yourself.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that I really enjoyed. You know, even while I was thinking about like this conversation with you, because I think over time the book has almost become like this super sacred object, right? And so everyone is so scared of even approaching the first page to experiment with it. I think people have kind of found a little bit of a format when it is like I've done this project and now I'm just gonna kind of sequentially kind of work with my edit. But the idea of just having fun with the book is almost, I mean, we don't see it as much anymore, maybe, you know.
So I
And
think, yeah, I think that actually it's what you're saying is totally reverse of what books are meant for. You
yeah,
sleep with them, you read with lying down your books. So you can't be scared of books. I mean, that would be not a good thing
right.
to get
Right.
into, you know.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, yeah, I mean, you just have to, I think, just try. I mean, that's what I can say. I mean, they're easy. It's not like, I mean, if you, I can say that I love like what would be in what we would call in photographic kind of terms
Right.
would be like I love sequencing and editing and like that's something I can turn my walls into sticking stuff and like just be looking at that. It's also is something I totally enjoy. And I think it also like even when I was in Tehelka and so I joined Tehelka when it didn't have a photo department and I spent a long time just doing this though I was the art director but my job was that of a photo editor actually.
That's what I would hear from the office, where everyone was
Yes,
like,
I would like
Uzma
just
was
be
just
doing that.
busy. She had created her own photo department for everyone,
Yes, because I mean it's I mean if you're looking at photography, you have to be enjoying looking at photographs, right? And
Right.
I already enjoy that, I think. But just this thing of the book, I think it comes from doing it. It's
Mhm.
like even when you talk about shooting, there are people who shoot like with such joy
Right.
and they can shoot every day and that's their thing. I mean, and that's wonderful. I mean, that's wonderful if you can whatever and I think the more you do stuff, the thing it becomes more fun and more engaging, and I think it comes from just doing.
Right. Right. And maybe we can now get to
Yeah.
A
So
book that became a set in retrospect.
yes, so basically this is a set of three journals, and basically they are about traveling into spaces which are, which have a history with conflict, or they are not. So they are basically, the three journals are from Kashmir, from Egypt, and from Cambodia. And what I can do is I can maybe begin with one and read out a bit so that I can, so this is a set like this and it comes in a box like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I can maybe read a bit from here.
Sure, that would be really
Just a little para to tell you what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So this journal actually was, when I was traveling to Egypt in 2015, and for me, Egypt, I mean, the Arab Spring was something which had left like a huge kind of a, just an impression of hearing it from so far away. So when I was going to Egypt in 2015, my biggest thing was to, like, I just had this thing of how will it be now Tahrir Square, now that the Arab Spring was over. So this journal is about that. I mean, this thing of, so I'll just read one little bit about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's 2015, 4 years since the Spring Revolution in Cairo. I arrived thinking about the remains of that spring. The city wears many faces, not all of them welcoming. Tourist advisories warn about terrorism and prohibit venturing into the no-go zones in the heavily barbed heart of the city, Tahrir Square, where I am headed. So basically, my idea was that I would like go and shoot the physical space. Like I just wanted to know what the physical space was like.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, when I ended up going there, I, uh, I was traveling with with Andy, and so the thing was that I got stopped by this. First, I started getting stalked by. Started getting followed by this one plain clothes person, and I was initially like, okay, fine, somebody is like following or whatever, and then it just became like he started saying something to me. Whenever I take out the camera, he would say something or something. Then I told Andy, let's sit somewhere. Let's not like kind of let him go away kind of a situation. But it finally became like this very strange situation. He wasn't budging. He actually finally walked up to us and then started saying things to us in Arabic. We couldn't understand what he was saying, but he was just trying to tell us to get out of there. And he was just trying to tell us to go back to Zamalek. And this whole thing of...
Which is the tourist part of it. Yeah.
So Zamalek is this area where the embassies and the tourists and, that's the kind of place where most of the people stay. I mean, they come and they visit everywhere, but that's where they stay. And we kept saying that go back to Zamalek, go back to Zamalek. And so this whole experience, so all these journals are actually based on certain kind of experiences which I had while traveling, and they kind of are reflective of the kind of melancholy which is kind of there in these spaces, and we as tourists are floating around in these spaces, So it's kind of and this I could not first, like the first journal was not enough for me to kind of say it and also articulate it for my own self. When I went to 3 different spaces, and these things, when you start seeing them, then so the first one, I'll just show you some images. So these are some images, but I'll show you the full video actually. But so these are the various like, let me just show it to you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so that's the first one, and I'll show you all of them together, so maybe then we can do the question. And this is the one from Cambodia. Again, I will read out a para. from it.
Turned out to be
I
a
can
nice
bore
book.
you guys with my reading, but I will.
Oh, but it's fun, I think. It's almost like, it's like an
So
audio
when I
book.
traveled to Phnom Penh, actually, I just yeah. So let me read it out.
Mm-hmm.
A headline: Witness recalls massacres at Khmer Rouge Tribunal catches my attention as I flip through Phnom Penh Post while having a morning cup of coffee on the first day of my arrival in the city. The hotel cafe where I am is a quaint property, modeled on Southeast Asian tropical ideals. The sun filtering through the stylish French windows is blind to the Khmer Rouge past. A pile of maps and tourist pamphlets lie stacked at the reception desk of the hotel. It dawns on me that 40 years have passed since Pol Pot's troops entered the city. So basically, this holiday was this thing where every day I would get up and I would read the newspaper, and the newspaper would be giving these accounts of the trials which are going on. And you are also in Cambodia going and seeing all these, spaces which are completely like spaces of conflict. Like you go to the, Genocide Museum, which was the S21 kind of a,
Yeah,
center.
it's a very
It's a
dystopic.
very like a, yeah, it's a very strange kind of space. So this journal is only just about me as a traveler, and finally how, like, how that kind of thing is affecting my stay there. So it's
Right.
just images from there. So I'll just show you the full thing. Actually, that makes more sense. Let me just show it. Yeah, and I'll just show you the last one, which is called Life is for Lovers, and it's of my travels to basically every winter from. I mean, I start in 2014. I started this, and we were going up skiing to Gulmarg, and it's on just being there in Kashmir, and I think it's just. It's very, very difficult to, kind of comprehend what is going on there. And I mean, even at that point of time, because this journal I put out in 2000 and completely like I made it and I took it out in 2016.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, even then, I mean, it was very difficult for me to kind of put it that just that impression also to put it was like the how to kind of put it together. I mean, the only thing which came to me was poetry, and so it was done like a visual poem. It's a very like it's not something like it's very simple. But actually, I should read the poem which it goes with. And it's a poem which is actually translated by, one second, it's translated by Arvind. Arvind Krishna Mehrotra has translated. He's translated this lovely set of Prakrit poetry, and in this collection called The Absent Traveler, and it's from there. So, I mean, after I had put this thing together, I was just skipping through this his collection, and I just found this, and in that time, at that space, this thing worked for. I mean, very different now what Kashmir is, but at that point of time, this is what I kind of went with the thing. So I called him up and I asked him if I could use this thing just to at the beginning. So it comes in the beginning. I greet them all, love born of deceit, love born of coercion, love born of cupidity, and love born of impediment. So it's a very short kind of a book, but it is it kind of goes with your equation, with my own equation of going to Kashmir. I have some extended family members from there, and it's this kind of love relation which we have with Kashmir in general, and also a lot of conversations I had with people who were kind of skiing and what we think, what is our idea of our equation with Kashmir,
And it's also something, I mean, I remember you'd mentioned that it is and it has become maybe, but it always was so difficult to kind of talk about Kashmir in, from one.
Yeah, it's a difficult conversation for sure, and that's why I think, yes, I mean, people have different, very, very uh, I wouldn't call it like, they have very strong opinions about it.
Right.
So, I mean, and I felt that this is just a record of an impression of my travels to a particular, like it's to Gulmarg. It's not, it's not a thing which is talking about Kashmir as per se. It's just just that thing that going there, seeing those people working hard, we as tourists going there and having this interaction with them. What is our right? What we think, in a conflict area, which is kind of put in this completely, made available for us to go and ski there. These are things which one has to think about. So, and I mean, these are very, you can have a whole conversation around this. So,
many, in fact.
Yeah.
I think
and this book is also about my own childhood of going. We as kids would go there. I have extended family who is Kashmiri. So it's not just that, it comes from all kinds of things. So that's what, I mean, I just show it. It's a very small journal. It's not like something.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to shift a little bit in our conversation and now actually talk to you, like, I think with the set of three, it's probably one of um, the more known of your printed books that do exist. And I was very curious that although it has been shown, like we'd shown it at Cardiff, and it's also something that was shown at, I think, Chatterjee and Lal is where you exhibited it as well for a show. But I was very curious that, I mean, I remember when I showed it in Cardiff, a lot of people kind of came uh, to ask me where they could get a copy of it. And then, of course, I was also, Iona was there as well. And so I was having this conversation with her, and when Iona said, no, these are published, but they're not for sale. And I was like, I never knew of that entity, and that dynamic. And I was wondering if there are certain specific reasons why you have chosen. I mean, this is not the only. There's, of course, I think for every other book as well that does exist.
So I think this work, I think I've shown it at Chatterjee and Lal in Zones of Privacy, which was curated by me, and then Cardiff, which Iona and you guys kind of curated. Then it also kind of was, it was featured in this book by 10 by 10 photo book, that how we see photo books by women. And as part of this project, they kind of also did a kind of a reading room, I think, in the New York Public Library, and they kind of acquired a set from me. And you're right that I have a very limited, small collection of these.
Tiny.
Very tiny collection of these. And I try and share it by not selling it, but by kind of putting it in places where people can engage with it. Like I kind of gave it to the library when it went to I was actually thrilled to that they took it. I mean, if it's part of a library, I think a lot of people can access it.
Right.
But for me to print these journals, I mean, printing is an expensive,
pretty expensive stuff,
affair. So, I mean, I can't keep printing journals, you know. I mean, it just doesn't, as of now, I can't. I don't see myself as this, but it's not that I have not shared it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, one can look at it in another way also, that I think this idea of in India to not have an underground kind of artist producing in artist situation thing is something, I mean, as an artist community, we should think about. Why should we always be producing for in big numbers? And how many are, and it's a huge cost you're undertaking. You know, might as well just produce a small amount and circulate it in the groups which are interested in taking it. You don't have to, and I think smaller spaces, smaller runs, smaller these kind of more interesting, more not being, you know, kind of this thing. I think that
that's something. But I mean, I've always been, I mean, and this is something I think that we're constantly kind of contesting, you know, as photographers or as people interested in making books for ourselves.
It's a hard line to follow, because I think a lot of the work, I mean, at one level, you do need support for experimentation, you know, and that's a big problem, which I think we are, as an artist community, we are facing that. Like, if you want to do a long-term work on your own, I mean, tell me, where will you get the support from?
There's, I mean, in terms of, there are very few funding agencies that actually allow for it.
So, I mean, it's not very easy as, you know, is to do stuff. So, I mean, it's not, I mean, one has to think about these things, but I think, I mean, it's also nice to do you do it in smaller runs and you share it with people. I do share it with people. It's not that I don't share it with people. But yeah, I don't make a run of 500 copies of it, which will sit in my drawing room. I mean, I don't need that.
So, I mean, do you think if you were to make 500 copies that you would be sitting with these boxes though? Because I mean, I know there's a very...
I mean, really, I'm not even there. I'm not even thinking like that, actually. I'm just thinking more like, you know, I'm sharing this work in the capacity which I can as of now. Tomorrow, when I have the money, and if I have a space, or I feel that I have arrived at this situation that, oh, you know, it's worth 500 copies, maybe I will make the 500 copies. Right. But I mean, right now, I mean, I would like to save my energies in making more work out of that money. If I save it, I'll make 10 more journals out of it, you know, or 10 more, I will get to travel somewhere else, or I like to do it like that. You know, I mean, I'm not like, I know it's not easy, but it is a tough thing. It is a tough thing.
I mean, because also in many ways today, like, I think the book is suddenly being looked at also as like, if you want to know what photographers kind of working on a project, it's like, let's look at the books that they're making and things like that. So, you know, in many ways, it is a very hard decision that you are also taking.
No, there's a lot of, if you are looking now, there is a whole movement of absolutely making very small, very crafted, very handmade kind of books, which are very limited, like literally, like this whole idea of the book as the object, you know, where you make this really, like, I mean, exploring that idea of the object. You have to explore. It doesn't have to go into these large runs. You have to think of the idea and you have to define it for yourself. I mean, for right now, where I am, I just feel that, I mean, I just prefer like making more journals, and I don't feel that, you know, think of, oh, I have to like take out like 100 copies of it to feel that I have arrived at some point.
Right,
I don't.
right. Uh, I know that we are a little over time. So if you don't mind,
Just finish.
I want to no, I want to continue with this, but I know that there are suddenly many questions that have that have popped up.
Okay.
Do you mind if we take a little diversion
Yes.
and just address the questions and then get back to
Yes.
our conversation? Okay. So Zahra Yazdani actually wanted to ask you. She says, I want to know, how does some artist like you, with this deep connection with making journals, archiving your life experience, and building narrative through making sequences by photo, drawing, and image making, think of the Instagram app? Can you consider it as a new digital way of journal making, a contemporary way of journal making, or and do you think it can be used by artists in the same way that you're approaching in your practice with bookmaking?
I think totally. I think totally. I mean, the only difference I find with Instagram, which kind of I I am very like kind of I did this thing with Tumblr actually. What people do on Instagram before that, people were using Tumblr and putting photographs. So one did this thing of clocking yourself, uh,
Mhm.
and it's a very good form of kind of keeping a diary. But I mean, yes, and you can keep it either private. But I mean, I'm still not very sure of this
Tech,
whole Instagram, Facebook using data, who's clocking you, who's there's some other
right?
level which we are not.
How you are being observed also with
Yes, exactly. I mean, we are
so
not.
well.
I'm not very sure of that. But as a practice, as of using Instagram, I mean, it's absolutely yes. It's exactly what I mean. In an old term way, I'm doing it like in actually physical form. But yes, you can absolutely do it on Instagram, and I think it's a wonderful thing to kind of you can record. And I'm sure you can actually people should use Instagram and try and think of how to use it even more
Right.
uh, in not just by single taking shots. They can actually think of other ways of using it.
Right.
Or there's some
You know,
very
one very interesting kind of thing that happened. I mean, earlier I was, to give in my my little bits, I was very wary of Instagram. I think I mean, I thought it was great for just exercising like a daily log or something of that sort. But I think one of the things that did impact me, apart from obviously the idea of someone accessing your data, your location, and kind of pretty much having this invisible stalker around you and not knowing the agenda of that stalker, in some
yes.
ways. But I mean, and there's something I wanted to do as a follow up to the question that came in was, do you think there is like, I mean, books remain in our memories because, like you said, we live with them. Like you'll find yourself half asleep one night, you'll wake up to find the books kind of still on your face, and you zoned out while you were reading it, or you carry it with you everywhere. And there's kind of like even this act of maybe ownership of the object, to a certain degree, where you begin to see the wear and tear. I mean, we used to have this thing of like putting in flowers or leaves of like whatever garden patch you were sitting in, and like, and that kind of creates a different relationship maybe with the materiality of the book.
Yeah.
um, and maybe like also the kind of focus it demands out of you, to have this object and to know that that you haven't turned the pages yet, as opposed to like an Instagram app where maybe to a certain degree you're not even expected to kind of hover over an image for too long, let's just say. Do you think that impacts how this
I think
forward and
I'm really not a person who is so much into nostalgia. Okay,
hmm,
and I'm not a purist. Let me
right,
also. I work with old techniques. I definitely love using them. That's a personal preference of mine. But
right,
it's not something that I would say that Instagram will not. I mean, it's a different tool. I mean,
right,
you can use it for the same. I mean, your thought process is immaterial of what tools you use. I
hmm,
mean, so you can still be using all kinds of things. I mean, you're most
right,
welcome to use Instagram. And yes, you're right about the only thing you're right about. Sometimes, I mean, this physical thing. I mean, new technology. Yes, I'm for it, but there are also like, yeah, you're right about the actually, like, otherwise, what happens, like with the new stuff, you're shooting so much, but you're not looking at it. When I shoot with my 35 now, I definitely look at my negatives, and I want to at least once look at them, look at it. Otherwise, you're digitally shooting like 10 times more, and not even like blinking at it, forget it. You're not like, you're just unthinkingly shooting. So, I mean, these are, yes, materiality of things is an important aspect for sure. I mean, how you discover it, or how you put it together, how you use different platforms, and I mean, that is definitely open-ended.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, you have to also see what's new and what is not.
Rather than become a redundant.
You can't be also like, oh no, I'll only make books and I will only use like this.
Which you don't, and I do want to share some, we have a few more questions, but we'll address them. But I do want to share how, the book is not the only form.
Yes, I will. Let me just, maybe I'll just finish the last bit, and maybe then we can just do the questions.
Sounds good.
It kind of shows what happens.
The variation,
Yes, because what we're talking about, it's very short, so it won't take too long.
No worries.
Yeah. So that's what, like, this is like a work journal from a series of mine called Now Is Gone, when I was working in Goa, and I was learning a cyanotype, which is like obviously an alternative old technique, like you guys call it. I'm just showing you the work journals from there, and I will show you what the work was. So it's not like the journal is exactly like the work. So while I was also there at the residency, they were doing a lot of other techniques, like they were doing the daguerreotype, which is a super old technique. And then I spent it just shows my notes about looking at analog.
I think our screen is, we can't see your screen yet. So if you can just, just try on the share screen again.
Okay. Is it?
Yeah, perfect.
Is it showing now?
Yeah. I can see your desktop.
Yes. So this is like notes of work. Like this is a work journal, learning a particular technique, or they're just making notes of.
Right.
But while I'm doing this, I am also doing sketches in terms of studies or sketches in photographs of the work, and that is this. This is the image journal along with that journal or that note making. Right. I'm just showing it to you a little bit. So it's from 2011 and 2012.
And this work is running parallel to your own experiments with alternative.
Yes. So this is before I make the final images, I am doing these recce's to what I will shoot and what is the space like. So this is actually a journal of that. So the work was based. It was on Goa. So it's sketch. It's like kind of studies of the space, which is this journal. Yes. And the final work is like this. So you can see how different the journals are from the actual work.
Right.
So it's not that every journal is going to be like journals can be of different forms. They can be digital. They can be some they don't have to be like this one imagined form.
Right.
And so like I'll just give you, like, this is the serendipity work, and for me the journal of this serendipity work, this work is still like I have to continue with this work, so I will see what happens. But as of now, what I imagined the journal to be, for me the journal was the RTI forms which I collected after.
If you can just give a little backdrop to the work.
Yes. So this work was about it was on the idea of kind of cross-examining descent, and I was looking at it. Kind of, this is. We were just having this discussion. This is all before Shaheen Bagh and everything happened. So this work was shown in 2018, so it's before that. And it was basically this, we was just having these conversations about, you know, how can you dissent, and who are the people who are dissenting, and what are the ways of dissenting. So I just started with a very simple thing of actually looking at, I was very curious about them. We have these kind of talks in our own houses about things, but who are the people who actually kind of put their view out there and say, hey, I don't agree. And what are the spaces which allow that? And so I looked at Jantar Mantar as a space where, you know, you register a protest. And so I filed an RTI to kind of look at who are the people who are kind of are the ones who are, you know, protesting, and what. So then through this RTI, I kind of did this. I spent time at the, you know, the Parliament House police station looking at files of, because if you have to do a protest, you have to get a permission to do the protest. And I kind of looked at all those, I kind of looked at samples from the last 5 years and looked at kind of, you know, these permission forms, which, you know, the RTI allowed me to kind of take out.
Oh, they gave you access into the archive.
You had to file an RTI. At that point of time, they did allow me. So they sent me a letter and they gave me a time, and I spent a very hot summer in June, July, sitting in the police station for a month, looking at, without really knowing how many people, like files there would be. I had no idea, and there were thousands and thousands of them. So I had to take samples. And so finally it became like a collection, which is actually to me, that is the really material journal for this as of now. You know, with my own little notings of my time. So it comes as these kind of forms, which I have kept very carefully. Like, this is not the form of but it's a very important form of, you know, it, to me, that is like a recording. You know? So this idea of journal always doesn't have to be, it's just a log, you know, it's a log. And it can be of your research material, it can be of your own headspace, it can be of visuals which you have done, it can be of studies which you have done. So you also have to expand that idea of the journal. Right. Yes. So and this is one.
There's one more to go.
One last, which is basically, again, this is from the work in the UK, which was looking at Punjabi diaspora in the UK and their lives. It's about lives of women of the Punjabi diaspora. And finally, the journal was basically a lot of writing, which finally I produced as a little written kind of text, which goes with so it was printed like this as part of the exhibition, along with a sound piece, which was like a kind of a free verse, which I kind of put together.
Okay.
So it's just, I'm just showing you that these journals, and the reason why I'm showing these journals is basically, is just that they don't have to be always what you are, they don't have to be like these books. They can be of different types.
Right. No, thank you. I think that was really important to also kind of realize the capacity of variation, you know, both in medium and content, that needs to be developed. And I think it ties in really well with, you know, how we started when you said that for you, the idea is all about the process and the exploration of that process. And that's why I think in many ways, you know, the journal becomes a traveling journal, becomes a document, becomes a recording, becomes a response to a poem, becomes a book that's a set of 3, because that is part of the play of it, even, you know, that it does not just restrict itself to being one entity itself. I'm very quickly going to take the 3 questions that we do have. Pritish actually wanted to ask, while taking photographs of people, especially the ones where the subject is recognizable, where do you draw the line between voyeurism and ethical representation? This is something which is fairly common while practicing street photography.
Yeah, so what has happened with me is that I usually don't now do a lot of street stuff or I do it, then it's in public spaces which you are taking, which allow you to kind of this thing. Otherwise, my process itself is such that I usually take out the camera a bit later in life. I usually go and hang out with people. I actually try and have a conversation. That's what I was telling you. My work comes out a lot out of conversations with people. So I have to be sure, and I have to make sure that they very well know that I'm shooting them. So it's not. And here in India, yes, you try to get a release form, and it's difficult because
I think also
sometimes it's just too scary a document. But yes, the other way to get around, like nowadays, I mean, these are the good perks of technology, is that I usually, if I don't even get a release form, I definitely try and send the pictures to people on emails or on WhatsApp, and tell them that, hey, I have this picture of yours and I want to use it or whatever.
Right. So
you can actually do a small gesture like that. I mean, you can begin with something like that. But yes, it's definitely, I mean, you have to be aware of the fact that, I mean, this thing of hiding and shooting is no more existing.
Right. Right.
So you have to engage with the subjects. You definitely have to. I mean, and any good work comes out of that. It actually comes out of spending time with your subject matter, which could be also this fact of making them pretty, I mean, trying to at least understand or at least get some sense of the work, of the space, and at least, I mean, I try. It's not necessary. We might not be able to represent them in the correct way also. It can happen. It can happen.
Right.
But at least basics can be cleared, like at least that, you're working, or what are you working on what kind of context is the work, or who are you working for? These kind of questions you have to tell them.
And I think they're very legitimate questions for someone who's kind of, exposing whether it's their home, their lives, their families, with you. I think the next two questions are actually to do with making the book or a zine, itself. And they both are anonymous attendees. So one wanted to know, what are the resources available for a photographer without age, regional, gender restrictions? I'm gauging this is for bookmaking.
Can you just elaborate this question to me? What are the resources available?
Yeah.
I mean, the simplest thing would be to get a basic book out and start
get a home printer and start printing, and get a stapler to start with and make your books.
Yeah, I mean, that's the simplest you can kind of do. Or you don't, if you have a computer, you can actually just start sequencing things. You can work around. I mean, yes, I mean, sequencing is a big part of the book. So I guess some exercises to do sequencing or editing. If you have a big collection of pictures, to shorten it down to what you're on the basis of your idea.
Just as an expansion of that, and since we were on the subject of editing, one more person wanted to know that, I mean, they want to publish a book of their own personal projects, and they're wondering if there is an ideal size or an ideal number of images that needs to be in a book.
So according to printing, there are, economically viable sizes available. There are, according to, if you ask a printing person if you want to print there, but nowadays, I don't know, it also depends on the number you are printing. And if nowadays, a lot of the people,
I think with numbers, if you're going digital or offset, that kind of.
Yes, exactly. If you are doing offset, but if you're doing a small run of digital, I think you can just, you'll have to work with your printing person. And the number of pictures and all that is all dependent on what you have shot and what you want to say. It's really not about, and obviously the budget you have.
Right. We have Rukmini right here in the attendees, and I'm wondering what she's thinking about this question as well. Rukmini
can definitely answer this for sure.
Yes, Rukmini is an amazing designer and has actually helped in quite a few of the photo books that we have in this country and outside as well. She might be a good person to look up and speak with for the anonymous attendee. Right. We don't have any more questions right now, and I know we've gone a half hour over. Thank
Yeah.
you for staying on, and thank you for
Lovely.
extending your time, Uzma. This was really nice. I'm really glad we did this.
No,
And
I'm very,
I mean, there's still more questions going on in my mind, but maybe we'll reserve them for our
the next-
next chat. You know, that would be really wonderful. But
Thank you for having me.
no, this was amazing. Thank you, and thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining.
Yes, let's stay on. Next Friday, we will be in conversation with Samya Shankar Bose, who's just come out.
Yeah, you have some very good lineup, I see.
I think so. You know, it'll be exciting to talk to him because he's also just released his book. I think last
Where
week.
the birds don't sing.
Yeah, and it's just like literally, it's come off the printer this week, and we're going to be having it in our bookshop as well. If you'd like to kind of get a copy, but it would be nice to also talk to him about making this book through the pandemic. He's actually been kind of working with his printer um, through this lockdown, and the printer's in Delhi, he's in Cal. Um, I don't know how these things work. We'll find out when we talk to him next Friday at 6. Thank you for joining in. Have a super weekend. Have a great weekend, Uzma. And now you can go back and play with your cats a little bit. We've kept you here for a while. But thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks. See ya.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.